We all know the name William Shakespeare, right? But what if I told you that his whole reputation as this timeless, untouchable genius is actually a pretty modern invention? Today, we're going to dive into the absolutely wild journey of how a popular entertainer became a cultural icon, a story that was anything but guaranteed.
So, was he always seen this way? The short answer? Not even close. We see him as this pillar of Western culture, but his path to immortality was an incredible roller coaster. He was a hit, then he was basically forgotten, then he was criticized, and then, get this, he was rediscovered by a totally different culture before his own country decided to reclaim him as a national hero. All right, so first up, the pop culture sensation. To really wrap our heads around this, you have to transport yourself back to Elizabethan London. You've got to see Shakespeare through the eyes of his actual audience, and what they saw, well, it wasn't some stuffy, high-art poet. They saw a blockbuster entertainer. I'm serious. Think of him as the Shonda Rhimes or the J.J. Abrams of his time. He was a super successful playwright. Everybody in London knew his name. His plays were popular, they made money, and he did very well for himself. But almost nobody was walking out of the Globe Theatre thinking, wow, that man is an immortal genius. He was in the business of providing entertainment, pure and simple. Or so they thought.
And this chart just lays it all out, doesn't it? It's a complete 180. In his time, he was a popular entertainer who adapted old stories and, yeah, was not shy about throwing in some vulgar jokes. But in our time, he's become this untouchable genius, a bastion of originality and high art. The perception couldn't be more different.
So, what happened after he died? You'd think his star would just keep rising, right? Nope, you'd be wrong. After his death, Shakespeare's fame didn't just fade, it was almost completely wiped out by a massive political and cultural earthquake that rocked England to its core.
This timeline really shows you the nosedive. He dies in 1616, popular but not yet a legend. Then, just a few decades later, bam, the Puritan Revolution hits and all theaters in England are shut down for 11 years. Think about that. An entire generation grew up without ever seeing his plays. He wasn't just less popular, he was practically invisible.
So how does anyone come back from that? Well, his comeback story is fascinating. And it has a huge twist. It didn't even start in his home country. The real revival, the movement that brought him back from the dead, so to speak, came from a very unlikely place: Germany.
Before the Germans got to him, early critics like the French philosopher Voltaire were, let's say, on the fence. His take was basically, yeah, the guy has good ideas, but wow, is he crude. They thought his plays were messy, full of sexual references, mixing comedy and tragedy. That was a huge no-no. It broke all the classical rules. To them, he was a diamond in the rough, with a heavy emphasis on the rough.
But here's where everything changes. Where the French saw flaws, this new German literary movement saw genius. It was called Sturm and Drang, literally storm and stress, and these guys were all about intense emotion, individualism, and, you guessed it, rejecting the old rules. So for them, Shakespeare's so-called chaos wasn't a flaw, it was the very thing that made him brilliant. They essentially rebranded him. They looked at a character like Hamlet and saw more than just a tragic hero. They saw a profound, emotionally complex individual wrestling with his very existence. This new, romantic way of reading his work is what planted the seeds for the Shakespeare we all know and study today.
Okay, so you've got Germany going absolutely wild for this English playwright. Meanwhile, back in 19th century England, the Victorians are starting to notice. Fueled by this huge wave of national pride, they basically said, hey, wait a minute, he's one of ours. It was time to reclaim their forgotten writer and turn him into a national hero.
You could almost say England got a little competitive. The process was very deliberate. First, they reclaimed him. Then they canonized him, making his plays the centerpiece of English education. And finally, they elevated him into a symbol. They created the figure of the Bard, the ultimate national poet, a stand-in for English cultural power and genius. And from there, his reputation just went stratospheric. By the 20th century, Shakespeare wasn't just England's national poet anymore. He had been promoted. He was now placed at the very center of Western civilization, a figure so monumental he was pretty much in a league of his own. And this quote from the hugely influential critic T.S. Eliot is basically the final stamp of approval. To say that all of Western tradition boils down to just two names, Dante and Shakespeare, and there is no third, I mean, that's it. That's the mic drop. It marks the final stage of his journey, from popular entertainer to a foundational pillar of modern culture. So this all leaves us with a pretty fascinating question. If Shakespeare's story proves that greatness is something that's built over time, that it's shaped by culture and circumstance, well, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Who are the popular, maybe even kind of unpretentious, storytellers of our own time that future generations might look back on as the defining geniuses of our age? It's a wild thought that our Shakespeare could be hiding in plain sight.